Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Life-Changing True Stories today. I bring you a powerful and deeply loving story asterisk. The morning sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber as Emma Sterling stood before the full-length mirror in her bridal suite. Her wedding dress was a dream come true. Delicate lace sleeves and a flowing train that seemed to float behind her like seafoam. She had imagined this day 1,000 times, but reality somehow felt even more magical. Her best friend Lauren finished securing the veil, stepping back with tears in her eyes. Emma smiled at her reflection.
Watching the pearl necklace.
Her grandmother had worn at her own wedding 50 years ago. Today was supposed to be the beginning of forever with Richard Blake, the man who had swept her off her feet 2 years ago at an art gallery opening. He had been so charming that night, complimenting her sketches and asking about her dreams of becoming a successful designer. Their relationship had been a whirlwind of romantic dinners, surprise weekend getaways, and late-night conversations about building a life together. The ceremony took place on a cliff overlooking the ocean, with white roses and trailing ivy creating an archway that framed the endless blue horizon. Emma walked down the aisle to the sound of a string quartet, her heart racing with joy and anticipation. Richard stood at the altar in his tailored navy suit, looking handsome as always, though Emma noticed something strange in his expression that she could not quite identify. It was not excitement or love, but something distant, almost troubled. She pushed the thought away, blaming it on wedding day nerves. They exchanged vows as the ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and flowers. Richard's hands were cold when he slipped a ring onto her finger, and his voice wavered slightly when he said his vows. Emma attributed it to emotion, never imagining the truth that would shatter her world just hours later. The reception was everything they had planned. Twinkling lights, dancing, and champagne toasts from friends and family. Emma floated through it all, feeling like the luckiest woman alive as the evening drew to a close. Emma and Richard drove to the luxury hotel where they would spend their wedding night, before flying to Greece for their honeymoon. Emma changed out of her wedding dress into a simple white nightgown, her heart full of hope and dreams for their future. She walked into the suite's living area, expecting to find Richard waiting with champagne, ready to celebrate the beginning of their married life. Instead, she found him sitting on the edge of the sofa, his head in his hands, still wearing his dress shirt and suit pants. The jacket lay discarded on a chair. Something about his posture sent a chill down her spine. Emma approached slowly, her bare feet silent on the plush carpet. When he looked up, his face was pale, his eyes filled with something that looked like guilt mixed with desperation. Richard stood up, running his hands through his hair in a gesture she had seen before when he was stressed about work. But this was different. This was their wedding night. Emma felt her stomach twist with anxiety as she waited for him to speak. The silence stretched between them like a chasm, growing wider with each passing second. He cleared his throat twice before the words finally came out, rushed and clumsy. He wanted a divorce. He was in love with someone else. It had been going on for months. He was sorry. So sorry. But he could not keep pretending anymore. The woman was Natasha Morgan, his boss at the investment firm, someone Emma had met at company dinners, and always felt slightly intimidated by with her sharp suits and commanding presence. Emma felt the room tilt. Her legs weakened and she grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. This had to be a nightmare. This could not be real. Not on their wedding day. Not after she had just promised to love him forever in front of everyone they knew. The words kept pouring out of Richard's mouth. Explanations and justifications that sounded hollow and rehearsed. He talked about timing, about not meaning for it to happen, about how Natasha understood his ambitions in ways Emma never could. Emma found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. She asked him why he went through with the wedding if he was in love with someone else. Richard's answer cut deeper than anything else he had said. He thought he could go through with it. He thought his feelings for Natasha would fade. He thought marrying Emma was the right thing to do because she was kind and stable and would make a good wife. But standing at that altar, saying those vows, he realized he was making a terrible mistake. The cruelty of his honesty left Emma breathless. She had not been his first choice. She had been his safe option. And now, mere hours after they had been pronounced husband and wife, he was discarding her like she meant nothing. Emma pulled off her wedding ring with shaking hands and placed it carefully on the coffee table between them. She told him she would not fight him. She would not beg him to stay. If Natasha was what he wanted, then he should go to her. She packed a small bag with trembling hands, throwing in whatever clothes she could grab without really seeing them. Richard tried to help, tried to touch her shoulder, but she flinched away from him. His touch felt like poison now. She called a taxi and left the hotel suite without looking back, leaving behind the marriage that had lasted less than 12 hours. The driver asked if she was okay, noting her formal updo, and the fact that she was clearly leaving a fancy hotel in the middle of the night. Emma just shook her head, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She directed him to her old apartment, a small one-bedroom, a place in a less fashionable part of the city, that she had kept renting out because she was not sure about moving in with Richard before the wedding. Thank goodness she had trusted her instincts. The apartment was exactly as she had left it, modest and simple, but it was hers. Emma dropped her bag by the door and walked to the window. Looking out at the city lights blurring through her tears, the next few days passed in a haze of pain and disbelief. Emma called her mother to explain what had happened, her voice breaking repeatedly as she recounted the devastating conversation. Her mother wanted to come stay with her, but Emma refused. She needed to process this alone to understand how she had been so blind. Lauren came by with groceries and wine, holding Emma while she cried and cursed Richard's name. The wedding gifts started arriving by delivery, cruel reminders of the future that would never exist. Emma took a week off work, unable to face questions from colleagues about her honeymoon. She spent the time in her apartment, alternating between crying and feeling numb. She looked at wedding photos on her phone, studying Richard's face in each one, searching for signs she had missed. Had he been thinking of Natasha when he kissed Emma at the altar? Had he been counting down the minutes until he could confess his betrayal? The questions tortured her, but she could not stop asking them. On the 8th day after the wedding that never was, Emma forced herself out of bed and into the shower. She stood under the hot water for a long time, letting it wash away the tears and the feeling of worthlessness that had settled into her bones. She dried her hair, put on clean clothes, and made herself breakfast for the first time in over a week. The eggs were bland and the toast was slightly burned, but she ate every bite. It was a small victory, but it was something. Emma returned to work the following Monday, holding her head high despite the sympathetic looks from coworkers who had heard about the divorce. She threw herself into her design projects with renewed intensity, staying late at the office and volunteering for extra assignments. Work became her refuge, the one place where she could forget about Richard and Natasha and the humiliation of being left on her wedding night. Her boss noticed her dedication and began assigning her more prominent clients. 3 weeks after the wedding, Emma was working on a branding proposal for a new restaurant when she realized she had not thought about Richard all morning. It was a small breakthrough, but it felt significant. She was beginning to understand that healing was not about forgetting what happened, but about learning to live with it without letting it define her entire existence. She started going to yoga classes in the evenings, finding peace in the meditation and movement. She reconnected with friends she had neglected during her relationship with Richard. One Saturday morning, Emma decided to treat herself to coffee at a new cafe that had opened near her apartment. The place was bright and modern, with large windows and plants hanging from the ceiling. She ordered a caramel latte and found a seat by the window, pulling out a book she had been meaning to read for months. She was halfway through chapter 3 when someone bumped her table, sending coffee splashing across the surface and onto her jeans. Emma looked up to find a man in his early 30s, standing frozen with an expression of absolute horror on his face. He had dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead, warm brown eyes, and wore a casual button-down shirt with jeans. In his hand was an empty cup that had clearly just spilled its contents all over her table and lap. Before Emma could react, he was already grabbing napkins from the dispenser, apologizing profusely. His name was Daniel Cross, and he was an architect who had just moved to the city for a new job. Emma found herself laughing at his frantic apologies, assuring him that accidents happen and that her jeans would survive. Daniel insisted on buying her a new coffee and paying for her dry cleaning, even though she told him it was unnecessary. There was something genuine about his concern that touched her. Something refreshingly honest after months of Richard's deceptions. They ended up talking for over 2 hours. Daniel told her about his work designing sustainable buildings. It's about his love for jazz music and hiking, about his recent move from Seattle. Emma found herself opening up in ways she had not expected, talking about her graphic design career and her dreams of starting her own studio someday. She carefully avoided mentioning the failed marriage, not ready to share that pain with a stranger, no matter how kind he seemed. When they finally parted ways, Daniel asked if he could see her again. Emma hesitated for just a moment before agreeing. He was not asking for forever, just coffee. She could handle coffee. They exchanged numbers, and Emma walked home feeling lighter than she had in weeks. That evening, she received a text from Daniel, thanking her for being so gracious about the coffee incident, and asking if she would like to have dinner the following weekend. Emma stared at the message for a long time before typing yes. Their first official date was at a small, Italian restaurant tucked away on a quiet street. Daniel arrived exactly on time, carrying a single sunflower because he remembered Emma mentioning they were her favorite. The gesture was simple but thoughtful, and Emma felt her guarded heart crack open just a little. Over pasta and red wine, they talked about everything from childhood memories to favorite books. Daniel made her laugh with stories about disastrous architectural projects, and Emma shared her embarrassing art school moments. As weeks turned into months, Emma and Daniel's relationship grew naturally and without pressure. He never pushed her to share more than she was ready to give, never demanded explanations for the sadness that sometimes clouded her eyes. They went to art galleries and outdoor concerts, took long walks through the city parks, and spent lazy Sunday mornings reading newspapers over coffee. Daniel was patient and steady, qualities Emma had not realized she needed until she found them. Emma's career was also flourishing in unexpected ways. Her boss assigned her to lead a major rebranding project for a chain of boutique hotels. It was the biggest opportunity of her career, and Emma poured her heart into it. She created mood boards and design concepts late into the night, finding joy in the creative process that had always been her true passion. The hotel executives loved her vision, praising her innovative approach and attention to detail. One evening, about 4 months after meeting Daniel, Emma was working late at her apartment when her phone rang. It was her mother, calling to check in as she did every week. During their conversation, Emma realized she had not thought about Richard in days. The wound that had felt so raw and consuming was slowly becoming a scar, still there, but no longer bleeding. She told her mother about Daniel, about her career success, about how she was learning to trust herself again. Emma also started making changes to her appearance. Not for anyone else, but for herself. She got a new haircut, shorter and more modern than the long waves she had worn for years. She updated her wardrobe, choosing clothes that made her feel confident and powerful, rather than simply pretty. She joined a gym and started working out regularly, not to change her body, but to feel strong and capable. Every change was a declaration of independence, a statement that she was rebuilding herself on her own terms. Daniel noticed the transformation and told her she glowed with a new confidence that was beautiful to see. He shared his own vulnerabilities with her too, talking about a previous relationship that had ended badly and left him questioning his judgment. Emma appreciated his honesty, understanding that everyone carried their own wounds. They were two imperfect people, learning to trust again. Taking small steps towards something that felt increasingly real and solid. 6 months after the wedding that never was, Emma completed her hotel rebranding project to rave reviews. The client was so impressed that they offered her a contract to redesign their entire portfolio of properties. It was the kind of career breakthrough that could change everything, and Emma accepted without hesitation. She celebrated by having dinner with Daniel at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city, feeling grateful for how far she had come. That night, Daniel told Emma that he was falling in love with her. He said it simply, without drama or grand gestures. Just an honest statement of fact. Emma felt her heart race, old fears rising up to remind her of the last time someone claimed to love her. But when she looked into Daniel's eyes, she saw only sincerity and patience. She told him she was not ready to say those words back yet, that she cared about him deeply and appreciated his honesty. Daniel smiled and took her hand, telling her he would wait as long as she needed. 2 weeks later, Daniel suggested they take a weekend trip to the coast. He had found a charming bed and breakfast overlooking the ocean, a place where they could relax and escape the city's constant noise. Emma felt a flutter of nervousness at the idea of a romantic getaway, but she agreed. She trusted Daniel in ways she had not trusted anyone in a long time. They planned to leave on a Friday afternoon, spending 3 days enjoying the beach, good food, and each other's company. Emma packed carefully for the trip, choosing comfortable clothes and a new turquoise bikini she had bought on impulse during a shopping trip with Lauren. Her friend had whistled appreciatively when Emma tried it on, telling her she looked amazing and deserved to feel confident in her own skin. Emma had blushed but bought the swimsuit anyway. Along with a breezy white cover-up and sandals that made her feel effortlessly elegant, the drive to the coast took about 3 hours. With Daniel at the wheel, and Emma in charge of the playlist. They sang along to old songs and made up silly lyrics, laughing until their sides hurt. The tension Emma had felt about the trip melted away as they left the city behind, placed by a sense of adventure and possibility. When they finally arrived at the bed and breakfast, sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. The property was even more beautiful than the photos had suggested. Their room had French doors that opened onto a private balcony overlooking the ocean, the comfortable bed draped in white linens and fresh flowers on the nightstand. Daniel wrapped his arms around Emma from behind as they stood on the balcony, watching the waves crash against the shore. She leaned back against him, feeling safe and content in a way that had seemed impossible just months ago. They spent Friday evening exploring the small coastal town, finding a seafood restaurant where they ate grilled fish and shared a bottle of crisp white wine. Saturday morning dawned clear and warm, perfect beach weather. Emma put on her new turquoise bikini, feeling a moment of self-consciousness before remembering Lauren's words about confidence. She covered up with the white beach dress and grabbed a bag with towels, sunscreen, and a book she probably would not read. The beach was not crowded. With just a few families and couples scattered along the sand, Daniel and Emma found a spot away from everyone else, spreading out their towels and settling in. Emma applied sunscreen carefully, then lay back to soak in the warmth of the sun. Daniel read a mystery novel beside her, occasionally reaching over to hold her hand. It was peaceful and perfect, exactly the kind of simple happiness Emma had been craving. After an hour of lounging, Emma decided to go for a swim. She stood up and removed her cover-up, revealing the turquoise bikini that complemented her skin tone beautifully. The workouts at the gym had toned her body, and the sun had given her a healthy glow. She felt good, genuinely good about herself for the first time in what felt like forever. Daniel looked up from his book and smiled at her, his eyes full of admiration and affection. Emma walked toward the water, feeling the warm sand between her toes and the sun on her shoulders. The ocean was cool and refreshing as she waded in, diving under a wave and emerging with a laugh. She swam parallel to the shore for a while, enjoying the freedom of movement and the sensation of being weightless in the water. When she finally came back to shore, Daniel was waiting with a towel, wrapping it around her shoulders and kissing her forehead. They were walking hand in hand along the water's edge when Emma saw them. Richard and Natasha, about 50 feet away, clearly on their own romantic weekend getaway. Emma's steps faltered, her breath catching in her throat. Of all the beaches and all the weekends, they had to be here at the same time. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. Daniel immediately noticed her reaction and followed her gaze, his jaw tightening when he understood. Richard spotted them at almost the same moment. Emma watched as recognition dawned on his face, followed by shock and something else she could not quite identify. His eyes traveled from her face down to the turquoise bikini and her toned figure, then to Daniel standing protectively beside her. Natasha said something to Richard, but he did not seem to hear her. His attention completely focused on Emma and the man with her. Emma felt Daniel's hand tighten around hers, a silent offer of support. She took a deep breath, drawing on the strength she had built over the past months. She was not the same woman who had packed a bag and fled a hotel suite in tears. She had grown, healed, and found genuine happiness. She was not going to let Richard's presence steal her peace or ruin this perfect weekend. Richard started walking toward them, leaving Natasha standing alone with a displeased expression on her face. Emma noticed that he looked different somehow. Older maybe, or just tired. There were lines around his eyes that she did not remember, and his confident stride seemed less assured than before. When he reached them, he stopped a few feet away. Clearly uncertain about what to say or how to act, Emma spoke first, her voice steady and calm. She greeted him politely, introducing Daniel as her boyfriend. Richard extended his hand to Daniel and the two men shook briefly, sizing each other up in that way men do. Daniel stood tall beside Emma, his presence reassuring without being possessive. He was not trying to compete with Richard or make any grand statements. He was simply there for Emma, letting her take the lead. Richard's gaze kept returning to Emma, taking in every detail of her appearance and the obvious happiness that radiated from her. He mentioned that she looked well, that she seemed different. Emma thanked him with a small smile, explaining that she had been focusing on herself and her career. She told him briefly about the hotel rebranding project and her new contracts, keeping the conversation light and professional. The awkward exchange lasted only a few minutes, but it felt much longer. Natasha eventually joined them, slipping her arm through Richard's in a gesture that seemed more possessive than affectionate. She greeted Emma with cool politeness, and Emma returned the courtesy with equal detachment. There was no animosity in Emma's heart anymore, only indifference. These two people were strangers now, their choices in relationship no longer relevant to her life. When Richard suggested they should all have dinner together sometime, Emma declined gracefully. She explained that she and Daniel were quite busy and preferred to keep their social circles separate. The rejection was gentle but firm, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Richard's face fell slightly. Emma realized with sudden clarity that he had expected something different from this encounter. He had expected her to be bitter or broken, to give him the satisfaction of knowing she still cared. Instead, she was thriving. She was happy. She had moved on completely while he was standing there, with visible regret in his eyes. Emma said a polite goodbye and turned to walk away with Daniel, leaving Richard and Natasha behind on the beach. She did not look back. There was nothing behind her worth seeing anymore. Her future was ahead, bright and full of promise. Daniel waited until they were out of earshot before asking if she was okay. Emma realized with surprise that she was more than okay. She felt liberated, as if seeing Richard again had closed a chapter she had not realized was still slightly open. She told Daniel about the wedding night, about the divorce request, and the months of pain that followed. She had not planned to share that story today, but it felt right to be completely honest with him. Daniel listened without interruption, his hand never leaving hers. When she finished talking, he pulled her into a hug right there on the beach. He told her that Richard was a fool who did not deserve her, that anyone who could walk away from Emma was either blind or broken. He said he was grateful for Richard's stupidity because it had led Emma into his life. The words were simple, but sincere, and they healed something in Emma that she had not realized still needed healing. They spent the rest of the day on the beach, swimming and talking and enjoying each other's company. Emma felt lighter than she had in months, unburdened by the weight of her past. That evening, they had dinner at a small restaurant overlooking the harbor, watching boats bob gently in the water as the sun set. Daniel reached across the table and took Emma's hand, telling her he loved her and that he wanted to build a real future with her. This time, Emma was ready. She looked into his eyes and told him she loved him too. She loved his patience and kindness, his sense of humor, and the way he made her feel seen and valued. She loved how he had never tried to fix her, but had simply stood beside her while she fixed herself. Daniel's face lit up with a smile that made Emma's heart skip, and they sat there holding hands and making plans for the future they would build together. The next morning, Emma woke up early and slipped out onto the balcony to watch the sunrise. Daniel joined her a few minutes later, wrapping a blanket around both of them as they stood together in the cool morning air. They talked about where they saw themselves in 5 years, about dreams and goals and the kind of life they wanted to create. Emma mentioned her idea of opening her own design studio, and Daniel immediately offered to help however he could. On Sunday afternoon, as they packed up to head back to the city, Emma took one last look at the ocean. She thought about the woman she had been on her wedding day, full of hope and naive trust. She thought about the woman who had cried herself to sleep for weeks, feeling broken and worthless. And she thought about the woman she was now, stronger and wiser and ready for real love. The drive home was peaceful. Both of them content to sit in comfortable silence punctuated by occasional conversation. When they reached Emma's apartment, Daniel helped carry her bags upstairs. Before leaving, he kissed her softly and told her he would see her tomorrow for their regular Tuesday dinner date. Emma watched him walk down the hallway, feeling grateful for the unexpected way life had unfolded. That evening, Emma received a text message from an unknown number. It was Richard. He apologized for everything he had put her through, admitted that leaving her was the biggest mistake of his life, and asked if they could meet to talk. Emma read the message twice, feeling nothing but pity for him. He had thrown away something real for an illusion, and now he was living with the consequences. She typed a brief response explaining that she had moved on and was happy in her new relationship. She wished him well, but made it clear that she had no interest in rekindling any kind of connection. She sent the message and then blocked his number, closing that door permanently. Emma felt no anger or satisfaction, only a calm certainty that she had made the right choice. 3 months later, Emma signed the lease on a small office space for her new design studio. Daniel helped her move in, painting walls and assembling furniture. Lauren threw her a launch party, inviting colleagues and potential clients. Emma stood in the middle of her studio, surrounded by people who loved and supported her, and realized she had built the life she always wanted. Her studio quickly gained a reputation for innovative designs and personal attention to clients. Emma hired 2 junior designers and took on bigger projects, including a museum renovation that earned her local recognition. She and Daniel moved in together after a year of dating. Finding a spacious loft apartment with exposed brick walls and huge windows that let in floods of natural light, they traveled together, exploring new cities and cultures. They hosted dinner parties for friends, trying new recipes, and laughing at their kitchen disasters. They supported each other through challenges at work and celebrated victories both big and small. Their relationship was built on mutual respect, honest communication, and genuine affection. It was not perfect, but it was real and solid and worth fighting for. 2 years after that fateful beach encounter, Emma and Daniel got engaged. He proposed during a weekend hiking trip. Getting down on one knee at a scenic overlook with mountains stretching out in every direction, Emma said yes without hesitation, knowing that this was right in a way her first engagement never had been. They planned a small ceremony with just close friends and family, focused more on the commitment they were making than on elaborate decorations or expensive venues. On her second wedding day, Emma felt none of the anxiety that had plagued her before the first ceremony. She wore a simple ivory dress and carried wildflowers picked that morning. When she walked down the aisle and saw Daniel waiting for her with tears in his eyes, she knew with absolute certainty that this was where she was meant to be. Their vows were personal and heartfelt, promises they intended to keep, as they danced at their reception. Emma thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain of Richard's betrayal had nearly destroyed her, but it had also forced her to find strength she did not know she possessed. It had taught her that she did not need someone else to complete her, that she was whole and valuable on her own. And when she was ready, it had allowed her to open her heart to someone who truly deserved it. Emma never saw Richard again after that day on the beach. She heard through mutual acquaintances that his relationship with Natasha had ended badly. He had struggled professionally and personally. She felt no satisfaction in his misfortune. Only a distant hope that he would eventually find the happiness he had been searching for in all the wrong places. Years later, when Emma and Daniel had built a successful life together filled with love, laughter, and 2 energetic children, she sometimes thought back to that devastating wedding night. She could see now that it had been a gift in disguise, saving her from a lifetime with the wrong person. Richard's rejection had hurt terribly, but it had also set her free to find something infinitely better. Emma learned that the end of one story is simply the beginning of another. That heartbreak, as painful as it is, can be the catalyst for incredible growth and transformation. That real love does not demand you change who you are, but celebrates you for exactly who you have always been. And most importantly, she learned that she was stronger than she ever imagined, capable of not just surviving betrayal but thriving in its aftermath. Standing in her design studio on a random Tuesday afternoon, reviewing sketches for her latest project while Daniel texted her silly photos from his office, Emma smiled. This was her life now. A life she had built with her own hands, on her own terms, filled with genuine love and hard-earned happiness. Richard's rejection on their wedding night had seemed like the end of everything. Instead, it had been the beginning of the life she was always meant to live. Thank you for taking that time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.